So we've been talking about Jim Crow laws, right? Uh, State and local statutes, laws that restricted Black people, that segregated Black people, that disenfranchised Black people, right? Uh, Yesterday, we talked about the Compromise of 1877, the compromise that made Rutherford B. Hayes president as long as federal troops were removed from, what was it, Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. Once federal troops were removed from the last remaining southern states, Jim Crow was officially ushered in. Yes. And now let's talk about Jim Crow. Now you know that Jim Crow laws were more than just anti-Black laws. They were a way of life. Under Jim Crow, Black people were relegated to the status of second-class citizens. Jim Crow represented the legitimization of anti-Black racism. Many Christian ministers and theologians taught that whites were the chosen people and that Blacks were cursed to be servants and that God supported racial segregation. I'm sure they were just teaching what their ancestors, the white masses. Let's move on. Let's move on before I scream again. Yes. Now, newspapers and magazine writers routinely referred to Blacks as the N-word, coons and darkies, and worse. And their articles reinforced anti-Black stereotypes. Even children's games portrayed Blacks as inferior. Now, you know that once the Compromise of 1877 went through and the troops were pulled out, yeah, disenfranchisement of Black people, yeah, between poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses, Black men were completely eliminated from voting in North Carolina, and only 0.5% could vote in Louisiana. That's 2 states. Can you imagine the rest? They were almost completely disenfranchised in the South. Now, once they had effectively kept Black men from voting, they next had to separate Black people from white people. Segregation. And we already know that waiting rooms in bus and train stations were segregated, as well as water fountains, restrooms, building entrances, elevators. They were segregated as well. And we know that Black people lived in different neighborhoods and the schools were segregated as well, right? But they also segregated public pools, phone booths, hospitals, asylums, jails, and residential homes for the elderly and handicapped. And they also segregated cemeteries. And there's more. In New Orleans, they mandated the segregation of prostitutes according to race. In Atlanta, Black people had a separate Bible that they could swear on in court. And you did know that the military was segregated for World Wars I and II, and it didn't become desegregated until the 1950s. Yeah. April 11th, 1913, President Woodrow Wilson agreed to segregate the railway mail service because, who was it? Postmaster General Albert Burleson said that he found it intolerable that white and Black employees had to work together. And this is an opinion that was shared by his cabinet. And I don't know why he was surprised, since his entire cabinet was made up of white Southerners who were all racist. Yes, they all argued that segregation was necessary to remove the causes of complaint and irritation where white women have been forced to unnecessarily sit at desks with colored men. So by the end of 1913, black employees in several federal departments had been relegated to separate or screened off work areas and segregated lavatories and lunchrooms. Yeah. Other examples of Jim Crow throughout the country? Birmingham, Alabama, 1930. It shall be unlawful for a Negro and a white person to play together or in company with each other in any game of cards or dice, dominoes, or checkers. Nebraska, 1911. Marriages are void when one party is a white person and the other is possessed of 1/8 or more Negro, Japanese, or Chinese blood. Missouri, 1929. Separate free schools shall be established for the education of children of African descent, and it shall be unlawful for any colored child to attend any white school or any white child to attend a colored school. Jim Crow laws were not the only thing dictating what black people could do. There is such a thing called Jim Crow etiquette as well. And that's next.